Yo, what is up, headhunters and executive recruiters? This is DSP, David Stephen Patterson, and today I want to make a video about motivation, and specifically, we're going to talking about this thing, hustle. Now, I love this little sign. I've got this up here in my home office, but I do want to stress that hustle is for amateurs. Hustle is for amateurs. Professionals know how to gain their own mental hardwiring to produce results. Amateurs should hustle, but hustle is not sustainable in the long term, at least for most people, okay? So with that said, let's dive in. Now, in our Facebook group, the Headhunter and Executive Recruiter Community, hashtag HERC for you uninitiated, David Moran had posted in there about asking the question, how do I find motivation? I forget the exact question, but it was something along the lines of, how do I find motivation when I don't feel motivated? And that is, I think, a question that plagues a lot of recruiters, especially those of us in agency who are running 360 desks. Maybe we're working independently or working for a firm, but at the end of the day, you know, we kill what we eat. We have to go out there, get clients, get candidates, put them together, and hopefully make a deal. And if we don't eat, right? And that's why so many of us recruiters are on this, right? So with that said, I went live in the group yesterday. Actually, yesterday was Daddy Day for me. So I was watching my little girl Izzy, and so I went live, and Izzy was helping Daddy. And so in the live video, you can actually hear I think I've got cartoons on in the background for any of you familiar with Little Baby Bum. I was trying to get her to watch that while I was shooting a live video. So it was quite interesting to say the least. But it was about a 13, 14, maybe 15-minute video, and I'm going to show it right now because I want to give you guys a kind of a starting point. And in that video, I talk about motivation, how your motivation is really, you're really like a flywheel, right? You can't think of motivation as being like just this thing that you either have or you don't have. You have a tool at your disposal, which everybody has at their disposal to instantly, well, not instantly, but almost instantly create motivation out of thin air, okay? And so in response to David's question, a lot of people were posting things, which makes sense, right? Motivation. Think about your family. Think about, your goals and all these different sorts of, seemingly good advice. And it is good advice at a high level. But at the end of the day, I want to give you guys practical tools, because giving you a high level, rah, sis kumbah, you can do it, buddy. Make sure you set your goals, make sure you hustle, and make sure you think about your family and your blah, 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 and your legacy, and all that's fine, all that's well and good. But at the end of the day, when the rubber hits the road, you have to find motivation. And if you don't have the tools to do so at will, then all that is just nothing but platitudes. So watch this video. I'm going to play the video right now. You may have already seen it, but I want to play the video for you now so we can talk, and then from there, watch the video and you'll see how I talk about how motivation is a flywheel. I give you a couple of practical tools. And then when we come back from the video, I'm actually going to expand on my thoughts a bit. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about a book called The War of Art. We're going to do a deep dive into that book on the back of that live video, which I'll show you here in a few minutes. And we'll do a deep dive into that book on what it means for you, and I'll give you some practical tools on top of what I teach you in this upcoming live video. Now, when you watch this video, my apologies in advance. I think a few times I'm actually looking at some of the comments. You may see me talking to some people. You may see me trying to wrangle the baby at the same time. So it's very, very raw, but I think it is a good message, and it's an important message that I think many of us who have these big lofty goals and big dreams, but we don't know how to game our own mental hardwiring to get the motivation to do the things necessary to achieve those dreams. And it's how we separate ourselves from the masses who live, I think, was a Thoreau that said the masses lead lives of quiet desperation. Okay? And I don't want that for you guys. So with that said, and without further ado, watch this video, my live video from #TheHerc. We'll play it right now, and then we'll come back and we will dive into the war of art. So I'll be right back. Hey, what is up, everybody? All the Headhunters Executive Recruiters in #TheHerc. So I've got baby with me here. So this is Daddy. Today's baby day. There's the baby right there. Anyway, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm going to try. I'm on baby duty today. Hey, what's up, Heather? I'm on baby duty today, so this is going to get kind of crazy, but I wanted to share this with David Moran, who posted in the group something about motivation, finding motivation as a solo recruiter, which is really, really, really hard. Believe me. Oh, babe. So the baby's going to be messing with my camera here. So, which I know is really hard for, let me take this off the stand here, which I know is really hard for solos, right? So here's the problem, right? Is that you're in an office with nobody else, and you've got to be self-motivated, and you're not going to have motivation every day. That's an issue. And so I want to share with you a couple of strategies that I've learned from others over the years, and that I know work for me. So anyway, and you probably hear in the background, by the way, you hear a little baby bum. So I've got that on the TV. She's not even paying attention to it. Look at that. God. Anyway, so motivation. Where do you find motivation? Here's how, right? So a couple resources I would look at first off are, there's a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson, great book. And there's also another series of books by Steven Pressfield. I talk about this all the time, so you guys will know. The War of Art, okay? And Turning Pro, which is the sequel, right? So here's the thing about motivation. Motivation is, this is what I've learned from these books and from The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Motivation is a fleeting thing. And if you guys have heard of writer's block, it's similar, right? Writer's block, in essence, is when a writer tries to write, or actually they come with every excuse not to write because they're not inspired, right? And so Steven Pressfield talks about this in his book, and that the lack of motivation is like a form of resistance to your higher calling, whatever the higher calling is, right? Writer, screenwriter, artist, making your recruiting calls, putting together, leaders and the top talent in your industry, whatever your higher calling is, it keeps you from that thing, right? Because you're not motivated, okay? So I would read the book, read this one first. It talks about how to kind of meet that resistance, and how, if you're a writer or you're a recruiter or you're doing whatever you need to do, a professional writer, what he does, or she does, is they'll sit down and they'll write shit. Just write crap. They just write. Doesn't have to be good, just write. And eventually, the action itself creates that inspiration, and that's when you start writing good material, right? And the lesson I want to share with this, and for those of you, by the way, just joining now, this is baby Izzy, and today is Daddy Day. Today's Daddy Day. And so it's going to be a dual live. She's helping Daddy. Helping. Anyway, and as you hear the little cartoons and the songs in the background, and we're watching the little baby bum. or I'm trying to get her a watch. She's not paying attention. Anyway, where was it? Yeah, so action. So action creates that motivation. So it's the act, if you're a writer, of writing and writing shit. That's okay. Just you have to get past that hump, and once you get past the hump, you start getting motivated, right? And Mark Munson talks about this in The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, where he talks about how you think of like a flywheel. You have to get it going, and it's hard at first to kind of get it pushed over, but once you get it pushed over time it gets easier and easier, and eventually you just have to tap it, and it keeps going, right? So your flywheel, in essence, is like there's three things that you need to do to create great work, which is action, inspiration, and motivation, right? The motivation to do the work, the inspiration to really do your best work, right? To come up with your great ideas or whatever it is, and of course the action to see it through. So typically people, when they aren't motivated, what they're really saying is that, look, I need to be motivated so I can be inspired to take action, right? And what happens is you're never going to be, very rarely going to be motivated or inspired first. So what we have to do is develop the habit or develop the standard of behavior where you always take action first. And so take even the smallest viable action, because the action is what creates the motivation to be that inspired, the action creates that inspiration, the inspiration creates the motivation creates more action, the action creates more inspiration, if you see where I'm going here, right? It's that flywheel. But the one thing we have control over in that flywheel is action. That's your pivot point. That is the handle on the flywheel. So if you're trying to use motivation or inspiration as that thing to get that thing going, there's no handle there. You find no purchase, right? You have no control over that. The one thing you have control over is action. Now, so the trouble comes in, well, how do you develop the habit? Chris Shields just said, meeting him for a coffee, mate. We can smash it out then. He lives around the corner. Oh, Dave, you live around Dave? Hey, cool. Don't mind for me if you didn't see this. Hey, what's up, Diane? Where was I? So anyway, it's that action, right, that you need to try to develop a habit of taking that action. So how do you do that, right? Well, first off, I'd start with War of Art. That's my go-to. It's required reading for everybody in my program. In fact, it should be required reading for everybody in the HERC. It is by far, I've read it at least a dozen times. I read it probably every 6 months because I need the reminder. Read it. I would also go watch my video. I posted it yesterday called the Getting Your Head Right. I think it's the YouTube video where I talk about having standards of behavior, because people typically are not going to breach their standards. For the most part, we sometimes do, but instead of having lofty goals, sometimes it's important to not just have lofty goals that you never reach. To really think about, it's called managing your downsides. Or raising your standards, have standards of behavior that you try to instill in yourself that you do not breach, right? Because there's more profit, and most successful people know this, there's more profit in managing your downsides, because downside meaning drinking too much, staying out too late, not waking up early, hitting that snooze button too many times, not making your calls. Our downsides tend to be longer and have bigger troughs than our upsides. So we have to really be cognizant to manage our downsides. Once you start managing your downsides, it becomes a lot easier to manage your upsides. But unfortunately, for a lot of us, we don't effectively manage our downsides. And and we're always thinking of our upside, and then we're always disappointed when we never achieve our goals. We never can get there because we're too stuck in the quicksand of our own mind and our lack of motivation or our own bad habits. It's like when people have these dreams of losing weight and getting ripped or strong, whatever, but then, at 1 o'clock and they get the craving for, that double cheeseburger and fries, and then that's your downside, right? And if you don't manage it, then you pig out on that, and then over time, every day after day, month after month, year after year, you never lose the weight, right? And the same goes with your relationships. Manage your downside, right? Do you need to argue every point? right? Do you need to, do you need to play video games instead of paying attention to your loved one? Do you need to be right all the time and not call your son that you haven't talked to in a year? Maybe just suck it up and just call. Whatever it is, you got to manage all those downsides, because without managing those downsides, you'll never be happy. And part of that is that motivation, that lack of motivation. Ooh, let me see that, sweetheart. Sorry, she took this pen. That's not good. Mama will be very upset if baby gets hurt on my watch. Anyway, so manage your downsides includes motivation. You're not going to be motivated most days. So you got to figure out strategies. Oh, hold on a second. She's got the remote. God dang it. Let me see that, sweetheart. Thank you. She's the remote. Anyway, managing your downsides. Oh, and real quick for others folks, show me. Say hi, Izzy. Hi. So managing your downsides is... So managing your downsides involves starting to try to develop strategies or habits, kind of gaming your own motivational hardwiring, okay? Now, everybody's different, obviously, but one strategy that you can use that I've used is developing small rituals or keystone habits that... and I talk about this. Actually, you know what? Go watch the first Zero to Hero recruiter training I did. It's on my YouTube channel where I talk about beating procrastination. There's a thing called solar flaring, right? Where you develop these little small habits and you create these little small wins, and those small wins create a little more motivation, and as that you get more motivated, you take more action, and it builds and builds and builds. A spiral of success up, right? So in the morning time, when that snooze button hits, what do? Do you hit it? If you hit it, you lose. You're starting the day off the loss. Or what I do, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom, get up out of bed, right? You want the first win of the day, which that is the first win or the first battle you want to win it, right? Small win. Make your bed, small win. Keep cornerstone habits, right? Let that next win build to the next win. What's that next win? It could be making 10 calls. I don't care if you're sick. I don't care if your dog just died. Whatever it is, make your damn 10 calls. I don't care if you're hung over and your mouth feels like you can't even talk. Make the 10 calls, right? And that little habit and that little action is going to spark motivation, right? Or here's something else you could do. And I do this sometimes on weekends, on a Sunday afternoon. And I'm just like, oh, I don't feel like doing shit. I do what I call do a time block, right? Time block is like a 15-minute, 20-minute, 25-minute block of work, right? Where I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to take a little bit of work. I'm going to do 10 minutes and that's it. I'm just going to force myself to do 10 minutes. And that's all I've got to do. It's just small little tasks. I'm tricking my mind. And by the time I'm done with that 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever, I'm kind of motivated to do a little more. So I'll do a little more. I'll do a little more. But you got to kind of trick your brain, because if you're unmotivated and you're looking at a thing where it might take you hours, you're thinking about, I got to crush it all day. Your mind is already kind of reeling back. I'm not like, so what you have to do is trick your brain and say, look, I'm just going to do these 10 calls and that's it. I'm going to work the next half hour and just be concentrated on that, right? And, hopefully baby's not dying. But that's what you have to do to help spark that motivation, right? So to recap, because I don't want to be on this thing too terribly long. We'll see what kind of comments I have. Hey, good morning, Mary. Good morning, Ryan. Ryan just posted an article on procrastination. Yeah, I'll check that out as well. So guys, check out that article. I'll post up, by the way, I'll post in the comments the link to that YouTube video. I'll post up the links to the Amazon links for all these books, right? As well as the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I couldn't find it, so I've got it somewhere. And then also posted the link, for the YouTube video, like I mentioned. Go watch that, specifically towards the end where I talk about beating procrastination. But again, just keep this in mind. That this is really, it all comes down to this, right? It's that flywheel. Action, inspiration, motivation. The only thing you have control over is action. Take small, calculated steps. Trick your brain, right? So you have to, in your life, set a standard for there's a minimum amount of action you have to take Don't hit your snooze button. Get up. Make your bed. Drink a full bottle of water and you wake up in the morning, right? Cornerstone habits. Let those successes build to the next, take a cold shower, maybe, whatever it is. Go do 5 minutes of jumping jacks or push-ups or actually a cool thing we used to do in the Army. I haven't done this in a while, but it makes working out in the morning fun. You do what's called a deck of cards, and you take a deck of cards out, and every time you flip a card, you do that many push-ups. And then obviously if it's a face card, you're doing like 10. If it's an ace, you're doing 11. And you try to basically you do this maybe every few days, and you try to develop the ability to get through an entire deck of cards. So just to make working out fun. Anyway, but those little cornerstone habits. And then when you get in, what's your standard, right? Standard behavior is not go get your cup of coffee and talk about Game of Thrones, Daenerys and blah, 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 on the water cooler. No, standard behaviors. The minute you get in, make those 10 calls before you even get your cup of coffee, right? It's those things that will develop that create action, that will create motivation. But if you're waiting on motivation, it'll just never come. It'll just never come, right? And that's a loser's game. Right? It's basically, you know what it is? It's an excuse. It's a weak-ass excuse, because what's going to happen is that you will use that excuse as the reason why you didn't succeed. In reality, you have the tools right there all along. Action. Small action. Small action creates big results. See what kind of comments I have. All right, guys. I got to go because I've got, again, I can't. You can't let baby die on my watch. So today is Daddy Day. Couple things. For anybody who's waiting on a message from me, I know some folks messaged me this morning. I'm getting through them all today. I'm kind of trying to work as much as I can and get caught up. And yeah, that's about it. So I will see you guys later. Peace. Okay, welcome back. So hopefully you got some good value out of that. Hopefully the baby Izzy didn't distract you too much, or the cartoons playing in the background. So now let's dive a little bit further, and we're gonna dive into The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. This book has changed my life. This book is required reading in my program. This book is also I've given out to friends, family. I've read it probably at least a dozen times. I read it every, probably 5-6 months, whenever I feel I need it, because I always feel like I need a bit of a kick in the ass, and this book will grip you by your throat and not let you go, okay? So I would highly recommend it. Now, he also has a sequel called Turning Pro, which I won't be going over today. It's actually quite a good book as well. Obviously, read this one first, then read this. This lays out some good concepts, and then Steven Pressfield gives you some additional tools in this book. But I would definitely go and read both. And I would also check out that book I mentioned in the live video, which you just saw, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Munson. So with that said, and by the way, if you're turned off by the title of that book, well then you've got bigger problems. So anyway, with that said, let's talk about The War of Art, okay? And how that relates to, or at least as an alternative to just trying to hustle, all right? So I've got some notes here. I've got quite a few notes. I want to make sure I don't miss anything, okay? All right, so let's go into The War of Art. Now The War of Art, Steven Pressfield, who is a famous author, screenwriter, and to give you some history on him, he never really achieved success, professional success, until his 40s. And he spent 20, 25 years working, of course, I think he was a Marine Corps, he was a gold miner. I mean, he did all these crazy jobs all around the world, but he always wanted to be a writer. That was his passion. And he never achieved his dreams, at least for a couple of decades. He tried and tried, but he wasn't trained hard enough, and he wasn't using the right tools. And finally breaking through, he realized the tools that he used can really be applied for anybody. but most of us are not given tools. And so in the War of Art, he talks about how we have really two potential lives. We have the unlived life, and we have we have our lived life, and we have our unlived life full of potential. So what does that mean? Well, your lived life is who you are right now, right? And ultimately, you have a vision for yourself, whatever that vision is, right? If you're watching this, you're probably fairly self-motivated to a certain degree. You've got dreams, goals, aspirations, etc. Now, it might be to scale up a 7-figure recruiting practice. It could be just to make $100,000 for the very first time. Although that means a lot less now than it did when I first got the business, but 6 figures is still kind of the bar, right, for a lot of folks getting in. So it could be that, or it just could be being your own boss. It could be losing the weight. It could be getting in shape. It could be fixing your relationship with your spouse. It could be fixing the relationship with your children. Whatever it is, we have this unlived life full of potential, right? And unfortunately, for the vast majority of this, there's this huge gap between the two, and there is his premise or his thesis in this book is that there is a malignant force of nature that, by its very design, is solely focused on keeping us away from our unlived life of potential and keeping us in our current lived life. And that force is called resistance. And resistance is the number one thing holding you back. Now, you may be asking, well, David, that sounds great. What is resistance? I want to know what it is so I can defeat it. Well, I want you to go look in the mirror. Stop this video right now. Go look in the mirror and look deep into the eyes, and you will see resistance staring you back in the face. It is you. There is a dark force holding your heels, and that, my friends, is you. And just saying, or just trying to set goals for yourself, just trying to achieve whatever you're going to achieve sounds great, but I guarantee you, for most of you, you have set lofty goals, you've created your business plan, you've done all these things, yet at the end of the day, you don't achieve it, right? I mean, really, for most of us, that is true. For me, for many years, it was very, very true, right? And so resistance is really the reason why you've probably very rarely achieved your goals, right? So we're going to talk about what resistance is, because for a lot of people, they don't really quite get it. Now, I will say before we go on, the War of Art is rooted in a form of philosophy called Stoicism. And I've talked about this before. In fact, if you go watch my video on The Obstacle is the Way, there's a book of the same name by Ryan Holiday, also a great book. And that book's title comes from a quote by Marcus Aurelius, a famous Roman emperor. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, but in essence, he talks about how the obstacle has to become the way. There's an obstacle in front of us for anything, right? And that obstacle itself has to become the way, okay? Now, what's the obstacle? Well, for a lot of us, it's a physical disability. It's a learning disability. Maybe you're ADD or ADHD or whatever the acronym is. Maybe you're depressed. Maybe it's a spouse that doesn't believe in you. Maybe it's, in fact, I can tell you for me, and if I were to be completely open and honest, I have a very major speech impediment. I have verbal apraxia. Now, when I was younger, I couldn't talk, or it was very hard for me to talk. Now, they thought I was a stutter, because at the time, they didn't really know what verbal apraxia was. But verbal apraxia basically is where your brain and your mouth don't quite connect correctly. There are pathways that are kind of screwed up. And so what happens is that the words that you're trying to say they can't be formed normally. Now, apraxia shows up differently for different people, but for me, it in essence caused me to get stuck on my consonants quite often. So what happens is when you're trying to start a sentence with a P or K sound or a D, whatever, or B, really, if there are any hard consonants even within words, I would get stuck, and I literally was like that. It was just like that, right? And I still deal with it to this day. Now, over time, the obstacle became the way for me, and I've been able to come on my own, figure out mental strategies and breathing strategies, even while I talk right now, relaxation techniques, so that way I don't get tensed up, and as soon as I tense up, bam, it hits. It's always in the back of my mind. But that obstacle, which for many folks, they don't get over it ever, which is crazy, and it affects their lives. And here I am doing this for you folks, for you fine, dead sexy recruiters who are watching this, because if you're watching this, I guarantee you're dead sexy. But in all seriousness, though, I wouldn't be here if that didn't afflict me. But because what happened was that obstacle, right? And that was a resistance that I had to do in form of external resistance. I had to meet that head on, because when I was younger, I was bullied incessantly. I was very, very bullied because of that. And so didn't have any friends. Socially, I was very inept. A lot of social anxiety. So if you have a lot of social anxiety, you don't have friends, what do you want more than anything else in the world? A friend. To be able to have people like you, right? So that's why I went and started working out. It's why I was able to, I worked so hard and diligently to overcome my speech impediment. It's why I went into recruiting. I thought, well, let me get into sales and all these other things. If I hadn't been that, with the way my mind works, I likely would have been, say, like an engineer or something. In fact, that's originally what I was going to go for, was computer engineering, until I had a brief time where I watched a lot of Law and Order, and I thought being a lawyer would be pretty cool. So I did poli-sci for a while, until I realized that that Law and Order is a fictional show, and lawyers aren't really like that. Anyway, we'll move on. So that was a form of my resistance, right? The obstacle that has to become the way. Because what's the alternative? The alternative is next year you'll be where you're at right now, which is probably not where you want to be, right? What's the alternative? You're gonna die. We're all dying. We're all dying. And it's a terminal disease we all suffer from. And I don't want you guys watching this to be sitting on your deathbed defeated, right? So anyway, let's talk more about resistance. So what is this resistance, right? And there's lots of different forms of resistance. Now, resistance really, ideally, or not ideally, but really, the most insidious form of resistance comes in your own head. Now, there's external resistance. For example, my speech impediment, correct, right? But in addition, there's that internal resistance. It's the reaction to my speech impediment that also becomes a form of resistance. Now, resistance is basically, at its core, is a repelling force, and its aim is to distract us and prevent us from doing our work. Now, what is our work? Our work is our higher calling. Whether you're a writer, screenwriter, artist, sculptor, politician, recruiter, business owner, entrepreneur, and for you folks who are independent, you have to wear a lot of different hats, right? So your higher calling also is to be the best father you can be, or the best mother that you can be, the best husband or wife or partner or whatever, or best friend that you could be, the best person you could be. We all have a lot of different higher callings. Now, to get to that higher calling takes work. Now, I'm a big believer in hard work. In fact, if you were to ever join the accelerator, not to cheap plug the accelerator, but one thing I tell people who join the accelerator, which is my kind of private, it's a private one-on-one / group program to help design a higher level offer, teach you how to sell it, to design a marketing ecosystem around it, etc. I mean, it's getting great results, lots of great reviews, etc. But not to cheap plug, although that is a bit of a cheap plug. But one thing I tell people that are in the program, and I have lessons on this in the program as well, is that this shit's hard work, right? Because when you look at let's look at just your practice, right? Your niche, let's say, is like this mountain, and all the recruiters in your niche, including you, you're all kind of skirting around the edges, right? Getting that low-hanging fruit. And there's room at this mountain, but to get on top of this mountain, you've got to go through the rain, the snow, the hail, lightning, wind. You might die. I mean, it's a treacherous route, and so people don't take that, right? But if you're willing to go up and scout that, and as your accelerator coach, I'll be there with you, scouting the land. I'll tell you exactly all the tools you need. I'll tell you how the best path to go up. We're gonna make sure you get there. At the end of the day, you gotta pick up your own 2 feet and make that walk. And there have been a lot of people that either we've turned down for joining the accelerator or have declined our invitation because either we felt that they weren't up for the task, or we dissuaded them from it because we told them how much work it would be. But it's so damn rewarding. But if you make it up that mountain, you climb it, you brave the fucking elements, and you get to that top and you plant your goddamn flag on top, and you defend it like hell against all comers. Now, once you're defending it, it's a little easier to defend because now everybody else has to go climb the mountain and knock you off your perch, right? But if you really want to dominate your industry and really do great things for your clients and your candidates, or really change lives and not just put asses in seats, well, you've got to kind of have that mentality, right? So that's what I mean by doing the work. And that's obviously just one example. You can use that same example, and again, being the best father you could be, being, I was a skydiver for many years, licensed. So, let's say that was my passion. I want to go be an instructor or go, maybe compete, right? I've got friends who do amateur competitions in skydiving. Let's say I want to go that route. Maybe that is my higher calling, okay? Whatever it is, it takes a lot of work and effort to get there. There's no such thing as overnight success unless you win a lottery ticket. What are the odds of that, right? So, with that said, let's go into some more detail here on resistance, because you gotta, if you want to be able to climb that mountain, whatever that mountain is, and you know there's work involved, you have to be cognizant of the resistance that you will meet. So let's give you some examples of resistance, all right? Now, resistance comes in the form of, let's put it this way. Resistance can come in the form of alcohol, over drinking, going out with your buddies on a Wednesday night knowing you have to work early the next day. Resistance also comes in the form of hitting the snooze button, right? Resistance comes in the form of procrastination. Resistance comes in the form of always having to be right and always getting the last word in when you probably should just shut the hell up to keep your relationship good, right? Resistance comes in the form of overeating. Resistance comes in the form of just being fucking lazy. Resistance comes in the form of not wanting to go to the gym. Resistance comes in the form of finding every excuse in the world not to go to the gym. Every excuse in the world not to do your work. Resistance comes in the form of you going into the office, instead of doing your work right there on the spot, getting a cup of coffee, going to the water cooler, talking to your buddy about Game of Thrones and Daenerys and her hooking up with Jon Snow. Spoiler, sorry. But that's a form of resistance, right? Resistance comes in the form of a lot of different things. And it's different there are some commonalities and common themes for most of us, right? We all want to hit the snooze button. That's a really common one. But for a lot of us, we have our own personal demons. That is resistance. And that's a lot of internal resistance. Not to mention the external resistance that you will inevitably meet on your way up the mountain. But here's some thoughts on resistance. Now, resistance, as Stephen Pressfield puts it, I'm going to read some of this here because I think it's really really important. So resistance is insidious. It will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work. And when I say anything, I mean anything. It'll fabricate, falsify, seduce, bully, use any form of reason with you. It'll pledge anything to make a deal. Now, what does this mean? Self-rationalizations, right? How often do we self-rationalize, right? We're trying to lose weight, and we eat that triple, cardio bypass burger and fries. And what do? We self-rationalize. Well, you know what? This is my treat. I was good all week. I worked out today. No, it's a form of resistance, and you're giving into your basest instinct, and it's a rationalization your brain makes. In fact, Stephen doesn't talk about this specifically, but something to keep in mind. Your primary drivers are what are located in what's called your limbic system. Your limbic system is really your basest, most reptilian form of evolutionary hardwiring in your head, right? Like the base of your skull, let's say, or your base of your spine, whatever. In essence, it's the drive for sex, for procreation. It's the drive to get as many calories in as possible because we may starve tomorrow, right? It's all those areas in your head that drive your behavior, and then so your higher level reasoning, a lot of that exists at the whim of the limbic system, and your frontal cortex creates rationalizations to justify what you're doing or what the limbic system is telling you to do, right? Your limbic system tells you to eat that cheeseburger. So your brain's going to rationalize. Your limbic system tells you to go hook up with somebody that you maybe shouldn't hook up with, and you rationalize it. Your limbic system tells you that, hey, just relax, go get a cup of coffee, eat that bagel, let's not put ourselves at risk by cold calling and doing our work or whatnot. And then your brain rationalizes it, and that's the problem. And that is a massive form of resistance. In fact, that is really, in essence, most resistance right there, right? So back to reading this. Resistance is implacable and cannot be reasoned with. It doesn't know who you are. It doesn't care. It is a force of nature. It acts objectively. Resistance is infallible. Now here's where you can use resistance as a tool. Resistance will unfailingly point to true north, and you can use that to your advantage. So here's what he means by that. So a good tool, or a good way to use resistance against itself, is to realize that you will feel resistance towards tasks that you need to be doing that your brain or rationalizations, whatever, will tell you don't do. And sometimes the stronger the feeling of resistance towards a thing gives you an indication that may be the thing that you really need to do, okay? And so professionals, not amateurs, but when you turn pro, which is really what Stephen Pressfield talks about in his sequel, Turning Pro, but when you make that decision to turn pro, when you are a true professional, and again, most people are amateurs. Being a professional isn't a degree, isn't a certification, isn't a level of billings, it isn't your experience in the business. I've seen 1-year professionals, and I've seen 20-year amateurs, okay? It's the decision that you make in your head and giving yourself the tools necessary to do what you got to get done, all right? Anyway, so a true professional recognizes, okay, this is my resistance, right? I can recognize it, I get it, I'm not going to shy away from it, I'm going to move forward. Remember what I said, the obstacle is the way. If that's your obstacle, that is the way. When you're looking at that mountain, you're like, oh, no, I don't want to do it. Well, that's the thing that you must do, right? That's the thing that you must do. So, back to the book. So, resistance is a compass. And wherever you're experiencing the most resistance, that's where you should be going. And Stephen Pressfield calls it the true north. I like to say the Polaris star just because I like to be fancy. Same difference, right? But that's your Polaris. That's your true north. That is your calling. Resistance oftentimes can be your best friend if you use it correctly. Most of us don't know how to, or don't have the habit and the standard of behavior to meet resistance. Now, go back and review my my live video I showed earlier on standards, and I have another YouTube video. I'll put the link up here, one of these boxes up here. You can click on it on standards of behavior and how to raise your standards about how managing your downsides, resistance, is actually more profitable than managing your upside. So go watch that video, and it'll give you some good concepts there. Back to Stephen Pressfield. The battle must be fought every day. It doesn't go away. It's an endless fight. In his words, resistance plays for keeps. Its goal is not to wound or disable, it aims to kill. And when we fight it, it is a war to the death. And he expands a bit more on this, but in my own words, basically this is a battle you have to fight every day. It doesn't go away. It doesn't get easier. It never, ever, ever gets easier. The only difference is you get stronger. You have better tools, right? You're smarter about it. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you want resistance to be your old friend. We meet old friend again on the battlefield, okay? But you need to know how to defeat it every single day, right? Because so far in your life, I'm here to tell you, resistance has likely beat you most days, more often than not. Time to turn that table. But again, when you wake up the next day, resistance, boop, is right there again. So, back to Pressfield. Resistance is most powerful at the finish line. So here he talks about how oftentimes resistance is most potent when you're about to cross the finish line. You're about to get to the very tippy top of the mountain, right? Because that's when, for most of us, say, well, we did it, we're good. I did just enough. The true winners in life, the true professional, know how to get that little extra inch. Sometimes it's a game of inches, like in American football. So resistance, you have to realize, is at its most potent and at its most deadly when you're right about to defeat it. So remember that. Now, let's look at some forms of resistance that he talks about. Self-sabotage is a big one. That's pretty obvious, right? But there's also, in terms of return of resistance, procrastination. And I'll give you some tools at the end of this video on how you can help beat procrastination. But procrastination is a big one. Sex is another one, right? Many of us, haven't been as responsible as we should have been when it comes to sex. That is a form of resistance, right? Sleeping in late. I talk about this a lot, hitting that alarm button. When you wake up in the morning, the first battle of the day, the first battle of resistance is the resistance to getting up, right? So what do? Your resistance is little bitch, and you hit that alarm clock or hit the snooze button, okay? Instead, and you're not going to do this every day, and initially get that habit formed, standard behavior. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom, out of bed. Get it. Do not lose your first battle of the day. It's not a good way to start out the day, okay? So procrastination is one. Drugs, need to list a whole bunch of them here. Drugs, alcohol, gambling, self-medication. If you're smoking weed every night, maybe are you self-medicating to numb yourself from the world? Nothing wrong with that. Smoking here and there is fine, but you gotta think, is it a form of resistance? Or is it? You gotta really be honest with yourself here. More. Social media, it could be shopping, gossip, self-doubt. Virtue signaling is a big one nowadays. They say outrage is all the rage. Okay, people love to be outraged, like outrage porn. That could be being offended, victimhood. Victimhood is a big one. God, I hate that so much. Telling people that they're victims, and then people believe that shit, and we have in this country, not to get off on a tangent, but we have so many great minds in this country that we are wasting by telling them that they're victims, when instead we could be giving them the tools they need to put those great minds to work to solve a lot of the world's problems that we have. So that's a big one. Feeling bored. Creating drama in your life, analysis paralysis, shame, right? Feeling like you're too old, feeling like you're too young, feeling like you're too pretty, right? Being a wantrepreneur, that's a big one, right? That's that hustle, right? I love Gary Vee, but at the same time, it ain't just about the hustle, right? Don't just be a wantrepreneur, right? So being a wantrepreneur, obsessing over email, sugar, you list sugar here, fast food, laziness, right? Consumer culture is in general, right? Binge watching Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, all forms of resistance. You need to develop the ability to spot that in your life. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. I had to go for a quick moment. So I'm on baby duty as well today. Baby was napping. You were probably hearing the monitor in the background. Elisa has watched the baby for another 15, 20 minutes. Give me enough time to finish this video for you dead sexy recruiters. So let's get back to it. And then I will get back to Daddy Day. All right. Where was I? All right, so consumer culture and all the other different forms of resistance. So let's talk about how to deal with resistance. Now, I've given you some tools, and this is where I'm going to kind of veer from the book a little bit. He does give some very good tools on how to deal with resistance, and but I want to kind of veer off a little bit and talk about some of the tools that I use for that, to combat that resistance. So if you watch that video, which I'm sure you did, that live video that I spliced into this video, I talk about the flywheel, which is, I guess you can say, a flywheel of our lives. We have motivation, inspiration, and action. Yeah. So I'm sorry. I got it backwards all the time. It's inspiration, motivation, action. So when people say they're not motivated, what they really mean is they don't feel inspired enough to get that motivation to then take action. And so one of the biggest tools that we have at our disposal really is just the handle on the flywheel is on the action piece, because we can't find purchase on the other parts of the flywheel, just that one. And so we need to develop the habit and develop the habits and rituals and standards of behavior that will make us take that handle and start turning it, right? Even just a little bit, little actions, small actions, big results, big success. But you have to start somewhere, and if you're gonna wait for motivation, or really, people wait for inspiration and motivation, and if you're waiting for those two, it's a loser's game. Losers, amateurs, wait for that shit. Amateurs wait for inspiration to hit so they can feel motivated, right? Amateurs wait to feel motivated or complain about motivation, right? Now, granted, you may not have the tools. I get that. I'm giving you that right here. So no excuse. Because really, candidly, once you've seen this video, there is no excuse. Tomorrow, if you say the same shit to yourself, I'm not motivated. How do I get motivated? I don't know, well, that's now I've just stripped that excuse away from you, right? But you watch this video right now, you can no longer legitimately make that excuse. So you're welcome for taking that away from me. And that's probably the greatest gift I can ever give anybody in this life, is that knowledge, okay? So there's no longer an excuse or a valid excuse. So get to fucking work. Excuse my French. So let's move on, all right? So dealing with resistance. So I've given you a great tool to deal with resistance, small action, okay? And I'll give you some more here. Let me see if there's anything here that I really want to go into. No, I think that's about it. I have a lot more notes here, but I think we're getting the gist, okay? Getting the gist. If you want to beat procrastination, if you want to be motivated, if you want to be inspired, Stephen Pressfield talks about this in his book, and he talks about writers, and he talks about writer's block, and I mentioned this in the live video as well, but writer's block is anybody who's written, or anybody who's even in my program that's trying to write content, like I don't know what to write. I got writer's block, okay? So what happens, writer's block is a form of resistance. So what happens is, instead of sitting at the computer or writing thing, whatever, however you write, instead of doing that, they're waiting for the inspiration to hit, right? So they're waiting for the inspiration, which never comes, and they're never motivated to actually sit down and write a freaking word, okay? And writer's block is an affliction of the amateur, but not the professional. So Stephen Pressfield, what he does and what he advocates, and what real pros do, is on a schedule. He wakes up, he every day, get his coffee, take a shower, whatever it does, do his push-ups or his calisthenics, his stretching. He's an older guy now. I think he's in his 70s, I believe, 60s, 70s. And then sits down and works and just writes. Sometimes he writes shit. In fact, most of the time he writes shit. It ain't good. It's not good, but he writes. He writes and he puts in his work. And as he puts it, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he earns the inspiration. He earns it. He earns it. Because what happens is, as he's writing, and then it starts flowing, starts coming, right? Because why? He took that flywheel, that handle on the flywheel, the only handle that he has available, and he is doing the yeoman's work of pushing it when he may not have the motivation to do so. So he'll just push it a little bit, and then he starts getting inspired and motivated. It gets a little easier to push, and it gets easier and easier. And the next thing you know, he's got that flywheel humming, baby. And then he's got to tap it, right, to keep it going, right? And then he writes well, right? And then, of course, the next day, the flywheel stopped. So grabs a handle, does that yeoman's work, and it goes the same thing. Now, so really that's the key. More than anything else. I mean, there's lots of other techniques and yada yada yada, but that is the key. So what does that mean for you? What does that mean in terms of actual tools? So let me give you some actual tools to use. So and I'll also point you to towards some resources. So in terms of books, I would put on your list The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Munson. Okay, great book. And he touches on a lot of these subjects. It's just a good book in general. War of Art. In fact, that's the first one you should read. Read Turning Pro, his sequel. He's got a couple other books on these subjects, but really these two. And if you're gonna pick one, pick the War of Art. That's the main one, right? That's the foundation. And then Turning Pro. So those are and The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, another great one. And that really does more to stoicism, but really all these concepts really derive from stoicism, the philosophy, the Greek philosophy of stoicism. Okay, so as you can probably tell, I'm a big fan of that, right? Namely because it produces results. Results do matter. So in addition, on my YouTube channel here, and I'll probably put up little boxes here where you can click and go to the video. I have my 0 to Hero recruiter productivity training. I've done 2 so far. Those are done live in the Facebook group, #Herc. And then I post them on my YouTube channel. I've done 2 so far, and I'll probably do several more. And I'm giving in those training, I'm giving a lot of actual practical tools, a lot of concepts as well, but also a lot of practical tools to actually get your shit handled, son. Okay, so but let's talk about some additional and also go watch the video called Get Your Head Right for Success, which where I talk about standards of behavior, right? It's a good concept to have in raising your standards. Remember, there's more money to be made and more progress to be had towards your goals by managing your downsides first. Everybody wants to set lofty goals, and it's fantastic and it's great, and I'm a big believer in that as well. But you must first learn to manage your downsides. If you don't, you're gonna be stuck in that quicksand. And again, the loser's game is lofty goals, not managing your downsides, and then finding excuses and rationalizing and waiting for motivation. Okay. So some tools. So a few things you can do to help spur this in yourself. Now, I would try to, remember how I said the action is the flywheel, right? What we're talking about here is a concept called solar flaring. Now, solar flaring or solar flare is, a little energy, I guess, imbalance within the core of the sun that travels up and gets stronger, and then eventually it explodes out into the solar system, right? It's a solar flare. So the concept here is taking these little small actions. What is the smallest viable action you can take towards your goal, right? What is the smallest viable action you can take today to get the flywheel started? Maybe it's 5 cold calls. Maybe it's writing a broadcast email to your list. Maybe It's, you know what it is for me? One of the things I hate to do is submitting candidates. Weird, right? Right? That's always been a block of mine. I have lost out on more deals because I hold off on submitting a candidate, right? Especially if it's a contingency, for example. And yes, I still work contingency sometimes. I'm not all engaged and retained. But earlier in my career, I would sit on candidates for days. I'll do it later. I'll procrastinate, and then I lose out on a deal because of it, right? I still hate. I don't know why. It's just my thing, right? So when I get in the morning, smallest viable action I could take out my candidate dashboard. Boom. That's all I need to do. Take out the candidate dashboard. Okay. Second viable action. That's a little easier. Okay. Put the candidate's name, visa status or whatever, and location, right? That's the next viable action. Or maybe even before that, get the resume, put that right there. Maybe that's the next viable action to take. And what's the next viable action? And on, and then get your shit done, right? So that's what I mean by what is your smallest viable action you can take, and that starts that solar flare. So start small. If it's a Sunday and you know you got to get shit done, but you're just not motivated, do 5 minutes of work, do 10 minutes of work, whatever it is, right? So that's kind of one of the first things I would do, right? Also, another practice you want to take is called clear to neutral. Clear to neutral means you want to clear whatever you're doing when you're done doing it. By that I mean, if you leave your desk to go to lunch, clear your desk. Put all the papers away, close down your computer, close out all your tabs, close your email, get rid of anything extraneous. Keep your shit clean, okay? Clear to neutral also means when you get up in the morning, make your bed. Reduce clutter. Reduce clutter in your life, reduce clutter in your mind. As a general rule, clear to neutral. So what it does is when you come in to your desk back for lunch, let's say, or the next day, or you come, and your desk is dirty and messy and there's tabs everywhere, your mind's already like, fuck, right? 'Cause remember, solar flare, start small. But if you don't clear to neutral when you come back to your task, you're just basically thrown into a world of shit. You're like, oh, I got this and this and this, and then it quickly just devolves down to non-productivity or procrastination, right? And we all know that multitasking doesn't really work, right? So, because it takes a certain time to switch from task to task, and you have all these tabs open, always taking your attention, so you're switching between all these different things, you can't focus on things that need to be done. So, clear to neutral doesn't just mean clearing your desk, shutting your computer down at the end of the day, clearing everything out, but it also means things like keeping your inbox at zero, right? It means cleaning your bed. When you come home from work and you have a messy bed, that's not clear to neutral, right? It signifies a messy life, a messy mind, but it also adds just a little bit of stress, okay? Have your car clean. Even though I work from home and I'm working independently, I make sure that I don't wear a suit, obviously, but I'm showering, I'm doing all my grooming, right? I'm making sure my shit looks sharp because I want to make sure that I'm not letting, I don't want to give resistance any purchase in my life. And that's what I mean by clear to neutral. So clear to neutral is just a great tool. Now, clear to neutral is especially important when it comes to your mind, because our mind is great for generating ideas, but it sucks for idea storage. And much like a computer, when you start using up all that RAM, that short-term memory, then the computer performance suffers and degrades. Well, it's especially true with our own minds. Okay, I've got to go pick up milk, and I've got to make sure I do this. I've got to email that candidate, and I've got to submit the candidate over here. I've got to make mine. I got all these different things running around your mind, and it's clutter. So I would go and watch the Zero to Hero Recruiting Training Part 2, where I talk about what's called the GTD, or also known as Getting Things Done, the GTD methodology. It's a project management methodology created by David Allen. It also has a book by the same name. Good book. I'm not sure if you really need the book. It's a pretty simple concept, but if you want to dive more into it, feel free to go and purchase said book. But GTD methodology is it's a system that once you put in place, and if you trust your system, you can put all of your thoughts, all of your ideas, all your tasks, all your projects, everything into this thing, right? And you organize it, and once it's out, it's out. And it's one of the biggest stress reducers you will ever find. Anybody that I've ever gotten onto GTD has told me it has made a world of difference. Now you have to maintain the system, you have to make sure you do constant reviews, but you have to trust the system. And that is a form of clearing it to neutral for your mind, okay? So clear to neutral, another important tip. So with that said, that really concludes today's video. I just want to go over, or at least expand on the topic of motivation, expand on, on the war of art and what resistance really is, because I think people just don't understand it. Understanding your enemy is your first step towards defeating it. In fact, Einstein said that if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes solving it. And unfortunately for most of us, we're here trying to solve the problem, but we don't understand the problem. This will help you understand and define the problem, right? And identify the enemy. And then from there, you can layer on top of that the tools to use on a daily basis to achieve what you want to achieve. I want to finish this with a quote from the book. Let me break this back out again here, because I don't want to get this wrong. And I love the quote because, look, at the end of the day, you climbing that mountain, right? Accomplishing your higher purpose, your higher calling, whatever it is, it may seem like it's selfish. And to a certain degree it is. Being selfish is important, right? Because you can't give to others unless you are able to, or you have to give, right? So now, whatever the higher purpose is, again, being a father, being a strong husband, a strong wife, business owner, leader, manager, recruiter, fitness person, skydiver, whatever, underwater basket weaving, whatever your higher purpose is, okay? Yes, you owe it to yourself, but even more so, you owe it to the world. So I'm going to close with this quote. Creative work, and when he says creative work, it does include everything that we do, right? Everything, not just writing. Creative work is not a selfish act or a bid for attention on the part of the actor. It's a gift to the world and every being in it. Don't cheat us of your contribution. Give us what you've got. In fact, if you need some motivation, it might be a good idea to take that quote, stick that on your desk, all right? Remember, everything you do to achieve your higher purpose is your gift to the world. And it is your moral obligation to the world and your family and your friends. So when people say, if you want to be motivated, think of your family, that's true. You owe it to them. But what I've given you here now are the tools to use to not only recognize that enemy that you face every day, but to defeat it every single day, to do battle with it every day. And maybe you won't win every single day, that's okay. But you'll win more days than most, and that's what matters, okay? So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Go check out those books. They're awesome. And with that said, a couple of things I want to close with here. If you, of course, you got to do my promos, right? So if you want to join this amazing group of dead sexy recruiters, we've got close to 6,000 members now. Maybe when you're watching this, it might be even more. But it's called the Headhunter and Executive Recruiter Community, #HERC. Down there, sometimes I sell the sweet swag in there, right? Just as a form of kind of community building. So go join that group. Also, if you're wanting to learn or get an introduction into the Lighthouse Method, the Lighthouse Method is my core pillar of recruitment marketing, or the core pillar of my recruitment marketing system, everything. The way I promote and market my coaching practice, in fact, the way I built it, the way I built my recruiting practice, All that is centered on the Lighthouse method. In essence, it talks about what that Lighthouse method is and how to apply it on social media to help promote your recruitment practice. And you can download that down below. It's a good read, about 45 pages. In addition, if you want to go through some free training, I have the 5 new model principles to scale your practice to 7 figures and beyond. And that link is also down below. It's on demand. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. Make sure you bring a pen and take copious notes, because I drop a lot of knowledge in that program. And last but certainly not least, if you want to inquire about the accelerator, which again is my higher level, fairly high ticket, but it's a high level program that has gotten tremendous results. You've probably seen the testimonials either here on the YouTube channel, in the HERC, and elsewhere. And it's kind of taken the recruiting world by storm. So if you want to get in on that, book a call down below. Now, once you book a call, there is a questionnaire. If you don't fill it out, I'm canceling the call, okay? Because I want to make sure I'm not wasting your time. I'm making sure you're not wasting my time. We want to make sure we get people in the program that are serious and that are not looking for a quick, easy fix. Because anybody's selling you a template, anybody's selling you a quick, easy system to get 10 guaranteed leads per month inbound, and we'll handle the marketing for you. Look, at the end of the day, paying for marketing, if they say paying for marketing and paying for advertising is like paying for sex, for losers only. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that wholeheartedly, but I do believe that you need to take ownership of your marketing, take ownership of your biz dev, and be willing to do the work, and don't just rely on somebody else's templates, because ultimately it never really works out very well, okay? And in the accelerator, we give you the tools, the guidance, all the training, all that to get you up the mountain. We've got templates that'll get you 80% of the way there, and because that last 20% that's really hard, we're gonna drive you to get up there, okay? And I'm not easy on my students, but I get results, and that I think is what you are probably looking for if you're still watching this extremely long video. So with that said, guys, I appreciate you watching, and as always,